Oh, okay, great. It is Wednesday, October 18th at 8 o'clock in the morning, and let the record reflect that all three commissioners are present, and we are continuing our budget presentations for a 2018 budget. And Ms. Wallace.
Thank you, commissioners, and welcome to day 3. This is our last presentation from our esteemed sheriff. So we're grateful for your time, grateful for his time. Just a little housekeeping items. This is set for 45 minutes. This is the equal amount of time that it has been provided to all of our presenters. And like the other presenters, if there are topics that are going to continue to another time period, we'll make sure that we capture those so that we can continue the conversation at a later time. Our budget coordinator, Tessa, over there is to help make sure that we stay within that allotted time. So green is about 40 minutes into the discussion, meaning you got 5 minutes left. The yellow card means you've got about 1 minute to wrap things up. And red means that that is the end of the presentation time. And we'll start that time when I conclude and pass it over to the sheriff. So with that, this will be recorded and posted onto the website so that our public can also view it and any other interested parties as well. Are there any questions of the commissioners or the sheriff? Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to the sheriff.
Good morning, commissioners. In keeping with the theme that you had with the public, I structured this presentation as a historical address to where we are now and what got us to the point that we are now. If you take a look at the Spokane County Sheriff's Office, there are really only 4 jurisdictions that we do not provide law enforcement for solely. That being said, if something major does happen in Liberty Lake, Airway Heights, and Cheney, we will respond, and our major crimes unit especially gets tied up in doing some of that work. We even do work in the city of Spokane, especially with the SIR team, which is the officer-involved investigations. That is a regional team. We go all over basically the 10 counties that have signed on to that particular agreement. I'm going to take you back to the 2006 draft capital facilities plan. The reason I do that is because it kind of lays out where we were headed before the 2008 crash. At that time, the Sheriff's Office in totality had 242. By 2008, that would increase to almost 248. That was with grants. During the 2008 collapse of the economy, the commissioners at the time and I agreed that we would never structure a budget with personnel based on grants again. It was basically building a house of cards. The population that we served at that point was roughly 215,000, and the officer per thousand level was 1.12. This includes the valley. The valley's officer per thousand was 1.15 during this time. The unincorporated area is 1.11. We had 142 deputies that provided services to the 128,000 unincorporated and small town. The adopted level of service based on the draft plan there actually lowered what we had. And there was a reason for that. If you take a look at what the national average is of 2.3 per thousand and go back to that 1.1 that we were, I have friends across the United States that can't fathom how we are able to do business with those type of numbers. Very rarely do you see anything below 2. The state of Washington ranks 50th in the nation for law enforcement manpower. There could be a correlation there between it and its property crimes issues, on top of the structural issues that we have with not holding those offenders accountable. Those are the true numbers in 2006 as far as deputies per thousand. I would challenge anybody to call the rural areas of Spokane County truly rural. There are areas in what we consider the rural county that have more population than some of my towns that we police. We were looking to go to 1.5 deputies per thousand. The reason that was the average of the state at the time, 1.5. Again, with the valley, we had 1.12. In order to hit that 1.5 by 2016, we would have had to have hired 150 additional deputies, officers. Again, that gives you an idea of where we were. Just to stay status quo by 2016, we should have hired an additional 33. The next slide shows you the reason that the adopted level was decreased, because it decreased it from 33 deputies to 17 that would have been needed by 2016. People may ask why we would plan the future at a lower number. At the time this draft was being proposed, the logic of the day was to use the sheriff's office as gatekeepers for the system. What I mean by gatekeepers for the criminal justice system was, the philosophy was, if we hire more deputies, they'll arrest more people, and the criminal justice system will need more judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and a larger jail. The philosophy was, don't arrest people, keep costs down. The result of that logic of that day sent us down this spiral. Right now we have a crippled sheriff's office investigative unit. Because of the economic downturn in 2008, the property crimes unit for the unincorporated area went from 18 property crimes detectives to 8. We have no traffic unit in the Spokane County unincorporated area. The number one complaint from the citizens of Spokane is not the drug house on the corner. It's not really the property crimes. It's the traffic issues. It's the speeding in the neighborhoods. Which is fortunate that we live in a community that's not worried about major crime, but this still is a major factor, and it causes a lot of economic turmoil for the county with the additional collisions, and not to mention the loss of life. If you're wondering why I say that the crime rate we face now is a two-edged sword, I'll get to that at the end of the presentation. Again, the target number for 2016 was 1.5 deputies per thousand, which means by 2016 we should have hired 94 deputies. Instead, we lost 30 deputies 2008 through 2010 because of the economics. So where are we now? We're at 0.76 deputies per thousand. Roughly half of what our target was. And roughly a third of the national recommendations at the low end. What will happen if we take the $1.3 million cuts? We'll lose 12 more deputies. There is nothing left to cut. We will close 2 patrol districts. The philosophy of the last economic collapse was this. We cut from the top down. We cut command staff, we cut lieutenants. We didn't touch sergeants because we didn't have enough of them to begin with. Failure to supervise is the number 2 reason you get sued, and we refuse to go there because of liability reasons. We cut our investigative unit. We eliminated every function that we could except for green and whites that respond to people's 911 emergencies. That was the philosophy. The most important thing we do is respond to people's emergencies. This time, I can't avoid any cuts into the patrol division. We actually will close 2 patrol districts. For the last 5 years, we have debated closing a patrol district. We're already at that level, but we have resisted that. With these cuts, there's no way we can further resist it. That will send us down to 100 deputies serving the unincorporated area with deputy per 1,000 of 0.67. Just as a comparison, the city of Spokane has 325 sworn. That's what they're projected to go to for their 217,000 population, which is 1.5 per 1,000. We serve a total of 252,000 population with 225 sworn. That includes the valley. Side-by-side comparison. I would also remind the board that Spokane County is roughly 1,753 square miles. The city takes up a small chunk of that. We have a much larger geographic area to police with a larger population, and we're doing it with roughly 100 less individuals. And that's not counting support staff. Support staff is at critical levels also. This is the current map of I had trouble getting the board to understand certain things as far as staffing. When you staff for 24/7, 365. In the past, when I've said one deputy, they go, well, you only need 9 then. No. One district takes 6 deputies to staff for 24/7. And we already work 12-hour shifts, which is the most efficient shift that you go to. When you're in emergencies, you go to 12-hour shifts. We've been in an emergency since 2003. That district also so 15 and 9 disappear. Gentlemen and ladies, that takes us back to when I came on the sheriff's office 22 years ago. There are 5 scenarios relating to the past 12 years. Looking at the county's draft CMP, this is what it would have cost we would have been able to nearly eliminate overtime, and I don't say that lightly, because in 2012, before June 19th of 2012, we had overtime going in the right direction. It was coming down. On that date, we lost control of our overtime. Date specific, I can give you the date that we lost control of the overtime. We lost control of overtime because we do not have enough staffing to handle any emergencies. We lost 4 deputies in one day because of one event. We could not absorb that. Current staffing plus the 30 that we lost between 2008 and 2010. This budget reflects what it actually takes to run the sheriff's office. The next scenario is current staffing and just properly funded, no additional FTEs. That's what it takes to properly fund us. Since 2012, the Sheriff's Office has been underfunded $1.6 million on average. I've had to come to the board, I've had to come and beat Jerry up over budgets and everything else, because when you underfund us and we have to come back in November, it makes us look like we've overspent our budget. That didn't happen. We were flat underfunded by $1.6 million, and we've warned the budget office about that every August before the budget year, that you are underfunding us. That was done to prevent us from using any excess monies to deal with capital issues, because we actually developed a plan in 2008 the board signed off on. Do just that. This is what the cuts look like. I don't know what that will do to overtime, because we're already looking at going to forced overtime, mandatory overtime. We're already there. We are in negotiations with the Deputy Sheriff's Association as we speak of how we structure that. We are forcing overtime as we speak now. In 2007, that was the adopted general fund budget versus 18. I throw the dupe fee numbers in there because I want you to understand that we have been supplementing our budget by the tune of almost $1 million with dupe fee money. Dupe fee money is money that is not stable. It is drying up. It will go away. It will probably go away next year. So you're not just looking at a $1.3 million cut. If that money dries up, we're looking at a $2.3 million cut. We have been patching holes with everything that we have, and commissioners, there are no more rabbits to pull out of the hat now. We have used everything that we have to keep the budget alive. This is an example of how our budget purchasing power has declined. If you take a look, there are many years that we're not even breaking even. Graph shows it a little bit better. The lime green line is the CPI. The lighter colored green, bluish green, is my actual budget. We have been under CPI for many years now. Our actual purchasing power has declined to $11 million. In order to make that up, you need to add $11 million to that 18 just to get me back up to where I was purchasing power-wise. We are not 22% of the budget. Depending on what fund structure you want to use, and there's so many that I've just kind of thrown the swag in there, we're either 9.4 to 10+% of the general fund. You will find that that is the lowest in the state of Washington. That's how little you pay for your law enforcement coverage. Our vehicles were in desperate need. If you take a look, in 2000, my vehicle budget was $621,000. 2017, $515,000. I can assure you, cars did not go down in price. Matter of fact, the Crown Vic is no longer in use, and the new platforms are much more expensive than the Crown Vic, and we can't do anything about it. We are trying to find every aspect we can. We went to buying used cars for the deputies, trying to stretch budget. Problem is, I have 60 vehicles over 150,000 miles. Those are patrol vehicles. Those are vehicles that do pursuits, that respond to high-speed emergencies. The industry standard is 80,000 to 110,000. It will take me 5 years at the current budget to start replacing those cars. By that time, you're looking at vehicles that are well over 200,000 miles. Properly fund that budget is $1.56 million. Why do we have equipment issues? Because Spokane County really does not have a capital budget plan or replacement plan. We have aging weapons. Our weapons platforms are 10 years old. They recommend starting to replace them at 10 years. One weapon platform is roughly 30 years old. Our tasers, they have a 5-year life cycle. We're at that 5 years. We have been trying everything that we can to find ways to replace those tasers. I mentioned the 2012 critical mass incident with the MDCs for the cars, the mobile data computers in our cars. In 2007, when we structured our strategic plan, we identified high-risk areas. That was a high-risk area in 2007. We told the board at that time that we needed to find a way to structure a replacement during those 5 years for when those computers started to age out. The board did nothing at that point. In 2012, we had a crisis. We were losing up to 10 computers a week. The board had to do an emergency infusion of roughly $250,000 to get our computers back up to where they should be. That's one of the major problems we have, is we have no way to plan for the future. We have an opportunity to partner with the Air Force on a state-of-the-art gun range. These are things that we should be trying to be able to plan for, but we can't. The budget philosophy is crisis management. I pretty much believe that I'm an expert in crisis management budgeting. We have no long-range planning because we have no ability to do a long-range planning because we don't know how to deal with the crisis that we're going to face next week. There is no strategic planning ability either. In order to develop a strategic plan, you have to be able to look to the future. All we can do is look to the next emergency. Why can't we cut elsewhere? M&O and capital is already at 12%. We've cut our leadership at the mid-level and command level. You'll find that that is the lowest of the county. You have departments that are roughly 53%. Our unincorporated detectives in major crimes, there's actually 6 people in major crimes. They're split between the county and the valley. Those 6 people are the same number that institutional knowledge has. That tells you how far behind that unit is. Roughly 34 years of institutional knowledge puts us at the same 6 people in major crimes. I can tell you major crimes, just by the sheer volume of the population, is at a level that we can't manage anymore. Sex crimes detectives are roughly in the same shape. Again, property crimes, we went from 18 to 8. No traffic unit. Spokane County has a limited support staff, and quite frankly, we're starting to bleed the best of our people because we are not competitive in wages anymore. We have had some extremely talented people leave us. They didn't want to leave. They loved working for the sheriff's office, but they have to feed their families. And quite frankly, our wages are too low in those areas, and we have way too much work. We only have one source of gang and drug suppression left in Spokane County, and that is the Safe Streets Task Force. We have no street-level drug and gang ability, suppression ability, none. Cuts to scope makes no sense. They save you money in huge ways. In 5 years, they saved you $10 million. Without scope, the valley and the unincorporated area, and I say the valley because I do have some valley appointed city council people that don't seem to understand the value of what they get from that particular unit, and they do a lot of bad mouthing of that unit, and I don't think it's very wise. But if you take a look at what they do, they are a force multiplier for us. They do citizen on patrol, which means they are actually in a scope car that has lights on it. People, it makes it look like we have more presence than we do. When we have an area that's being hit very hard by crime, we ask all the scope stations to focus on that area, and we are able to push that problem elsewhere. The incident response team, traffic control, accidents, major crime scenes, parades, none of that happens without them. And if it did happen, it would be with a lot more overtime. And we actually have scope personnel that are retired police officers, detectives that work with our major crimes folks in reviewing cold cases. We've had a great amount of success with that. They also control and operate our pond database, and they work with the property crimes detectives also. We've been trying to get to a point where we can actually use our scope folks along with some retired deputies, one retired undersheriff actually, to go after the worst of the worst in this area. I don't have enough staff to even bring that to bear. That is our biggest hang-up. I don't have enough staff to bring that to bear. I have the volunteers, but I don't have enough staff to make that work. So again, we cut that budget. That just means more overtime. And that would be a self-inflicted wound. I'm throwing this in for your consideration. The DWLS relicensing program cannot be cut. If you cut it, you send a spiral back down into the jail. You will actually increase the problems we will have in jail. This program helps people get out of that cycle. If you don't have a driver's license, you can't get a job. Can't get a job, you end up committing crimes. You go back to your old lifestyle. You want to break that cycle? That is one of the keys to breaking that cycle. I've thrown some accomplishments in. In the past, board, I have handed all board members, I believe Jerry, and I know John Dixon does have one, a binder that's about 3 inches thick of the history that I just laid out here. Every budget presentation, all the accomplishments and everything else. I'll work on getting the new commissioners that same binder. Because if you actually take the time to read it, you'll understand where we're at, how we got here, and what the true needs are. Traffic school. We developed that and started working on it in 2006, brought it to bear about 2007-8. 100% of those monies stay in Spokane County, and they are used to train citizens and law enforcement. That's one of the ways that we have not had to come to the board for increased training monies. Failure to train is the #1 reason that you get sued. We have never lost that particular item in any court case. And as long as I'm sheriff, I do not intend to ever lose that. The training unit, based on our business model, which we provide the venue, people come, they put classes on, we get free seats, everything works out for everybody else. These numbers do not reflect 2 years because we had some record keeping glitches in 15 and 14. But minus those 2 years, the training unit has saved Spokane County $3.9 million, and according to the Valley Chamber of Commerce, has had an economic impact of $5.3 million. Before I became sheriff, not all jurisdictions paid for their dispatching. I was able to work with all the jurisdictions, and they all now pay for their dispatching, which was roughly $180,000 additional revenue to the county that we never saw any benefit from. It went straight to the general fund. In 2007, we developed a plan to develop a capital replacement budget. That died in 2009 with the economic collapse. What that was is I found that there was X amount of money that I usually had left over a year, and I went to the board and went, here's my capital replacement fund. If I can stretch my budget, I'll use this money to take care of the additional things that I need. Again, that didn't work out so well. The helicopter, without the partnerships we have with the surrounding jurisdictions, we would not be able to pay its operating costs, even though it's a volunteer unit. That is another force multiplier. We built a take-home car program with no additional monies. People said we couldn't do it, but we did it. It took us 8 years. It improved our ability to respond. Instead of an hour and a half of loading cars and changing cars and everything else that a deputy did a day, that hour and a half is now spent patrolling. We've also have reduced maintenance costs due to decreased wear and tear. The cars actually last longer. Several years ago, we developed a priority-based budgeting philosophy, which caused me a lot of heartache internally, because what I did is I looked at all units and went, if you're not producing, we don't need you. We will put that money in areas that are producing and areas that are critical. Total change in philosophies. So everything that we have staffed, everything that we have structured, are units that are actually functioning and they serve a critical need. We've eliminated everything that didn't. We maintained our customer service focus. I refuse to ever let that fall. We serve the people. And that's one thing that I will always have in my heart when I structure a budget. How do I serve my public? Crime check was brought back, which is another force multiplier for patrol. The radio communication system was a big, looming money concern for the board. That has been dealt with. We developed a business plan, which is called intelligence-led policing. At one point, commissioners, we led the nation in this. We fell behind because I was unable to convince prior commissioner the importance of real-time policing capabilities. Real-time policing is the wave of the future. We were on the cutting edge. We are no longer cutting edge in this. The CAD that we currently have does not provide me with that ability. That was the one thing I asked out of that project. Give me real-time policing ability. It did not. Because of that business philosophy, I will tell you that that is the major reason we did not lose control of our crime. Our philosophy is very simple. We find out who's committing the crime and we go arrest them. It's not so much putting cops on dots, it's finding out who's causing the dots. And if you have the ability for predictive policing, which is real time, you can actually prevent crime. So we target areas and criminals, and we arrest them. We've had decreasing crime rates over the last several years. And that is simply because we have great people that work for us. We don't have the tools that we truly need. We don't have the staffing we truly need. But because the tenacity of the men and women that serve you and this community, we have kept that crime down. They take great pride in that. And I take great pride in them. The two-edged sword. Several years ago, Mike Jackson, the former Valley city manager, during one of our quarterly meetings said, well, looks like you did it to yourself again. You shot yourself in the foot. I kind of took a little offense to that. I was like, what are you talking about? Ozzie, you keep showing them that you can do more with less. You keep shooting yourself in the foot. I look at it a little different. I was trained at a very young age that you take what you're given and you make the best of it. Our property crimes have never risen above the 2004 rate. The reason that's important, 2004 was last year. Crime check was in operation before it went down. Crime took a massive drop because people's ability to report crime took a drop. When crime check came back, crime went back up, but it never went above those 2004 rates. As a matter of fact, I believe it was in 2015, the county's property crimes was below the 2004 rates by a large margin. Violent crime, we have seen the lowest in 20 years. The last 3 years, it's been slightly trending up. I'm not too overly concerned because we have been transitioning to NIBRs. NIBRs accounts for many, many more crimes than UCR did. However, I'm not totally comfortable in thinking it's just solely NIBRs. I think that we are starting to see a tick up in the major crimes issues and the violent crime issues. So why do I need more staffing if everything's going so well? Because we're burning people out. Again, I'm heading for mandatory overtime. Remember I told you it takes 6 people to staff a district? I have an overtime issue, folks, is I do not have 6 people to staff those districts. I told the board this January something that I've never said in my entire career in any field, I should say, because I'm not that type of an individual to be the sky is falling. Chicken Little does not exist in my world. But I will tell you that if something is not done very shortly, and it may be too late, we will lose control of our crime in the Spokane County region within 5 years. Something has to be done. Our citizens deserve better than this. I'm telling you right now, my professional opinion, watching the trends, if we don't get things back under control very, very rapidly, we will lose control. Spokane County is not decreasing in size, it is increasing in size. These are where the numbers came from. They're attached to your packet. Any questions?
Questions from fellow commissioners? Ms. Wallace?
Thank you, Commissioners. Sheriff, certainly from my background, one of the key indicators that we were looking at is really the crime trends per officer as a much more relevant indicator of officers and the number of officers that are needed. We're based on calls of service and certainly classified even further into the types of call types. Priority 1 versus priority 3 are certainly different call types. Do you have any kind of information like that that shows the correlation of officers to calls of service?
We can do that, but what you're talking about is also kind of voodoo economics, if you will, to go back to a phrase from the past. When I became sheriff and went to the Sheriff's Academy, they said, officer per thousand, get to know it, be very good friends with it. The reason that we have conflicting systems now is the IACP started to debunk the officer per thousand staffing models, and they will tell you what your staffing should be for a price. So I can dig all those numbers, and as a matter of fact, we have hired a company that is crunching those numbers as we speak.
I think that would be very good information.
But I also caution the board, there are multiple systems out there. The one thing that none of these systems will tell you is what the magic number is. That's the problem. They will not tell you, well, if you have this, you should have that. I have not seen that to this day.
But I know that the board last year funded some additional positions for you. Where are you at in terms of being able to fill those? I know that it's a challenge to try and recruit. And so of those positions, how many of them are still left vacant?
We have right now, because we just got hit with 2 more retirements, and a couple of people, because of integrity issues, have been washed out. We're at 17 vacancies right now. Okay. We have been closing that gap, and we have closed that gap very steadily. Prior to the newest rounds of retirements, we were down to 12.
Okay.
We were almost at that level of dipping into the pool positions. I will remind the board, the pool positions are not funded. So when we go into the pool positions, that's additional monies that have not been set aside. I caution the board on that. I've always I've always been a little reticent about the pool positions because they were never funded. The minute we dip into those, that is an additional drain on your funds. So that would be, we're down 7 outside the pool positions.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Time, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Appreciate the information. Okay. That completes the budget presentation. So any closing thoughts before we wrap up the hearing or the presentation process?
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Sheriff. Next week, just as following on next steps, next week is when the public will be provided, thank you, will be provided the opportunity to comment on these budget hearings and any of the materials that we will have posted on the county's website. And then, of course, October 30th is when we're going to schedule 4 hours of your time to go through your decisions. And we will be providing a guide for you based on a lot of what we've heard. We will also be amending some of the, correcting some of the information that you had in your budget proposals. So those are your most immediate next steps. And then we will be scheduling up time for some of the other major funds, such as sewer or roads, to come in and also give you a very brief overview of that before we wrap up the whole of the county's budget.
Good.
And if you have any questions regarding any of the other departments in your workbook, please let us know.
Okay. Any closing comments, Mr. Gimmel?
No, I think this. Talked about before, this is part of a process that will get better refined as we go. I think it's benefit not only for all of us and of course the board. I think it's a benefit to the public if they're interested in looking at a little deeper dive into the budget. So, good start, I think.
Okay. Closing comments from either my fellow commissioners?
I just want to thank all the department heads and elected officials that came in. I think a lot of them shared some very innovative ideas. Everybody understands that this is a difficult budget time that we're in right now, but I think all the departments stepped up, came forth with some great ideas. Also want to thank all the individuals from the public and employees here at the county that submitted ideas for other cost savings measures, and those are again another aspect that we're going to be looking into over the next several weeks, and we're going to end up with a balanced budget at the end of this.
And I would just like to reiterate that too. Just thank everybody. As the new commissioner, it's been a huge learning curve for the last 2 days. You having been an employee as well, it's a tough budget time. And so I just want to say thank you to all the employees, because I know they're all out there working really hard, and they are good stewards of the tax dollars for the citizens of Spokane County. So thank you.
So, as a closing comment, I'll share the comments of my fellow commissioners. We've got a great organization with some incredible employees that I think really do put the citizens' interest ahead of their own, and do a great job day in and day out. And so we are lucky. We're lucky to have the employees that we have for this organization. This will be a challenging budget to put together. And we appreciate all the information you provided us. Our goal is to try and find balance and to continue to try and meet the priorities for the community as we go through and establish the final budget. And as required by state statute, it will be a balanced budget, but it will be a much more informed budget, both from a commissioner standpoint. Been here for 7 years and have never been through a budget presentation as thorough as this. I appreciate the department heads, the other electeds and staff for all the work they did in putting this together, and it helps us make better informed decisions, so I appreciate that. With that then, it is 8:52, and we are adjourned. Thank you.